Hey review family, keep it tight. My name is Jay Morse, the review guy reviewing music for the love of music, and I'm back again to bring you another video. Albums. There's so many albums. I reviewed so many albums. But let's take a trip down memory lane for some of the best sister albums, brother albums, little tiny tyke albums, EPs. So continuing on with List Week 2019, I will be counting down my top 12 EPs of 2019.
Hey review family, so in the editing process I realized that there was a glitch around the first section of the review of the first record, which made it really difficult to edit. And instead of struggling to try to get it right, I just decided to re-record it here. So number 12 is the Engulf EP entitled Transcend. This is really no different than a lot of the other 20 Buck Spin albums. This wasn't released on 20 Buck Spin, it was released on Everlasting Spew Records. That being said, it's basically that, but just done on a smaller level, which is great. I think it's a nice little death metal project that doesn't try to be too flashy. This is also a one-man project, so it has that going for it. So definitely check it out if you're interested in that. Back to the normal setup.
Next up, I want to give a shout out to the Beartooth EP, the Blackbird Session. Really not much to comment on here. Really not much to comment on about this little EP. It's 4 tracks long and features them covering tracks from Disease, just country. And it's surprising how well the band is able to handle that theme, especially with Caleb Shomo's vocal style. He really does handle the vocal duties very well. Next up is SuperM's self-titled album. Their debut hit #1 on the Billboard Top 200 charts, which was huge for a K-pop debut. The funny thing about this one is you might not have expected to see this on it because I was a little critical of some parts of this EP. With that being said, it boasts one of the best K-pop singles of 2019, Jopping. Not to mention, I just generally think it's one of the better K-pop releases of the year. Production is slick, the performances are solid, but that is to be expected considering it's a supergroup and not a bunch of naive people that are trying to feel out their own sound and flesh out their own sound. These are experienced veterans that know what they're doing and know how to craft a catchy song. I don't think that's really means to deduct any points from the album. Next up is the EP from Wormed entitled Metaportal. This is a technical death metal band. One of the reasons I think this record succeeds where a lot of technical death metal nowadays fails is they aren't playing with a massive length that 100% works in their favor. Even though they're not playing with the most out there sound, their technicality really shines through the tracks that they do present because they're not bloating an album up. I don't think this would be nearly as enjoyable if you had a bunch of these tracks over like 40 or 50 minutes. I know it wouldn't be. Next up I have the Momoland EP, Show Me, kind of like the SuperM EP. Most of the record isn't the most standout, but I'm So Hot is just such a fun single. In fact, in my Spotify Wrapped, I'm So Hot is in my top 10 most played singles of the year. Fun fact for you. Much like their EP Great, I just really think these are some cutesy, glossy tunes that just sound really cute and fun. Next up I have Glass Crown with Despondent. What a great little gent EP. Surely drowning a little bit when it comes to the influence department, clearly taking cues from bands like Era, maybe a little bit of Born of Osiris, some Architects, some Invent Animate, maybe even some modern era Veil of Maya. But even so, even with influences, you can be somewhat derivative and still make a catchy record, and kind of like that Metaportal album, I don't think this would have been as good if it was a full length, because I do think that by the end of the EP they have worn out what they're doing a little bit, but the choruses slap like all hell and the riff writing is juicy and genty. Not to mention some of this album gets fairly heavy. Next up is Earl Sweatshirt's album, Feet of Clay. I don't understand why so many people hate on this record. As someone that loves Earl Sweatshirt, especially albums like I Don't Like Shit, I Don't Go Outside, and especially some rap songs, I love this album, or I should say I love this EP. It's such a logical step forward from what Some Rap Songs is, and considering he's always been experimental, especially on Some Rap Songs, I don't understand why people are so damn surprised. Some of these instrumentals are so avant-garde and so weird, but Earl's oddball delivery just keeps him sounding so fresh. Next up, I have the EP Call of the Void by the band Ingested. One thing I believe I stated in my review is I wasn't a huge fan of Ingested up until this point. This EP really changed my opinion. With them bringing into the fold sounds that sound like they're inspired by Uniquely to Records, we're talking Within Destruction and Acrania, I think it adds to their style a lot. This is a deathcore style that stays pretty atypical, but even through that atypicality, they have a lot of dynamics in the riff writing, and especially some of those brutal slamming deathcore influences that they thrust into their sound full force. God forgive me for putting that in a sentence, thrust. Next up I have Sedimentum with Demo. This was an album that I stumbled upon, and I am so glad I did. It's a very gritty death and doom metal hybrid with a forlorn doom metal section and just some very heavy death metal sections. It can be gloomy, but it can also be so rough around the edges that it makes you want to claw your face off. And I feel like I'm a broken record, but with a lot of these records, I think this excels by being as short as it is. It's so compact, and the production style is full of life and organic, but still just very dark and low. Next up I have BTS's EP mini album Map of the Soul Persona, which I actually have on physical copy. What can I say? This EP just boasts some really great singles for BTS, whether you're talking about Boy With Love, or some of my favorite tracks on the album are some of the deeper cuts like Make It Right or Jamais Vu or even Dionysus. I think BTS is becoming more and more accessible over time, and there isn't a big single on here or song that really reaches certain fever pitches like Mic Drop or Fake Love, or even some of the more rap-centric tracks off of Love Yourself Tear, like the outro Tear track. And while they're going for a much simpler ballad-ish approach, even though they do have some high-octane bangers on the track listing, and nothing's as high-octane as their previous material, I still enjoy this EP quite a lot, and still find myself going back to many tracks on it. Next up, the Primitive Man and Hell split. This released early in the year, and I got to it super late. Was surprised anyone watched that review. Even though it's my second favorite EP of the year, what can I really say about this that couldn't be described or heard by listening to it? It is all hell-breaking heaviness. If you enjoyed Primitive Man's album Caustic, which is my personal favorite release for them, check this out. It is crushing. This whole album is crushing. This EP is just as crushing. Admittedly, I'm not a huge fan of Hell. The track they handle is definitely my least favorite of the three. It's also the longest of the three. I do like their more death and doom metal centric sound, but Primitive Man, the two tracks they handle, especially Oily Tears, just have all the power of Caustic and then some. And then finally, my favorite EP of the year. At this point, expect to hear a lot about this artist on this channel. Nothing Nowhere and Travis Barker, Bloodlust. Nothing Nowhere on my Spotify Wrapped, for context, is my most listened to artist of the year. He's also my most listened to artist of the decade. He basically almost stole the first place spot in my last album of the year list, and what can I say? Even though this is a bit of a short-lived EP, this is definitely my favorite of Travis Barker's contributions to the rap field, whether you're talking Suicide Boys or Youngblood. Travis's drumming really fits Joe's style, and Joe embellishes upon that with more metal guitars, and with more heavy guitars, and with more overall rock-centric soundscapes, which combine that with Travis Barker, and he just sounds like an emo rock god from the 2000s. But you do get a lot of rapping, don't get me wrong, on tracks like Destruction and True Love, and especially Torture, which I love Torture. I love Torture, me, 2019. But of course, I want to know, what are your favorite EPs of the year? Go ahead and post it in the comment section below. I want to hear it, of course. Be sure to like this video if you enjoyed it, subscribe to join the review family today, and smash that notification bell to be notified of my future uploads. You know who it is. My name is Jay Morse, the Review Guy, and I'm signing off saying farewell.